Hey guys. So as we start this new unit, there's so much background and vocabulary that I want you to know. So I'm just going to kind of do a quick introduction to the concepts and the terms that you're going to need for the genetics and heredity unit that we're going to do. So what even is genetics, right? Well, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, it's the study of heredity and the variation of inherited characteristics. Cool. What does that mean? Well, heredity is how parents pass traits or characteristics to their children. Um, Things like a physical characteristic, like maybe having your mom's eyebrows or your dad's nose, um, or having something like red hair, like my favorite fictional family, the Weasleys, or even having eye color that's similar to your parents, which the Harry Potter franchise royally messed up in the films. Harry should have inherited his mother's green eyes, and Daniel Radcliffe did not have green eyes in the films, which is why that's one of my favorite memes. So those are all examples of traits or characteristics. Things like having a cleft in your chin as well, or a peak in your hairline. Those are things that are easy to see. Those are traits. And these are traits that are passed from parents to children. But how do they get passed? Well, all of our genetic material is stored in our DNA. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, which is a type of molecule found in cells. Um, More complex cells, like plants and animals, have this DNA inside their nucleus. Less complex cells, like bacteria, the DNA just kind of floats around freely in the cytoplasm. DNA can get bunched up into what's called a chromosome. So that's a word that you'll probably hear a lot when we talk about genetics, but all chromosomes really are structures of DNA. It's a way for our cells to organize the DNA within our nucleus. Humans have 46 chromosomes in each body cell. 23 come from your mom, 23 come from your dad. So our DNA is a combination of both mother and father DNA. Each of the chromosomes have specific genes on them, and they code for different traits. So a gene is something that is just controlling the traits that are expressed. So if you have certain genes that have information that tell your body what color your eyes will be, you'll have a gene maybe for brown eyes or maybe a gene for blue eyes. But most traits are actually controlled by multiple genes. But just to keep things kind of simple, we're going to just look at how one single gene might control a trait, because each gene also has different forms, and the different forms of genes are called alleles. If we're going back to heredity, remember, which is how parents pass things down to children, you get one gene from your mom and one gene from your dad. You get one allele from your mom and one allele from your dad. They might be different. The alleles might be different from each of your parents. If you have a blue-eyed gene from your mother and a brown-eyed gene from your dad, you have two different alleles. So the alleles are just specifically different genes. If you have the same allele from both of your parents, you are homozygous for that trait. If you have different alleles from your parents, you're heterozygous from that trait. So homo just means same, hetero means different. So another example would be on the purple flower versus the white flower, you have a combination of two purple flower alleles, two white flower alleles, or a purple flower and a white flower allele. And each of these will give you a different expression. When alleles combine, they make an organism's genotype, which is just the combination of genes that we can look at on a chromosome. Looking at the examples here, we have three different genotypes for the color of the flowers. So up here, right here, we have big B, which is homozygous dominant, big B, little b, which is heterozygous, and little b, which is homozygous recessive. We are using capital and lowercase letters to show the different alleles and show the combinations of alleles that can be made for each of these genotypes. So a genotype is the organism's genetic makeup. A phenotype is the physical characteristics that we get from the genotype. It's what we actually see. So for our flower example, there are two phenotypes, purple or white. And an easy way to remember the difference between genotype and phenotype is that genotype is the actual gene, so genotype gene, and phenotype is the physical characteristic, phenotype physical. So just hopefully a way to differentiate between those two terms since they are so similar. And each genotype can result in a specific phenotype, one being dominant to the other. A dominant trait will overpower a recessive one. So you only need one dominant allele to see the dominant trait. For example, brown eyes are dominant to blue eyes. So even when you have a combination of brown and blue-eyed alleles, you'll still only get brown eyes. And again, it's more complicated than that, but we're just going to make it very simple for right now. Recessive traits need two of the same alleles in order to be expressed. So for blue eyes, you need two blue-eyed alleles. If I had one brown-eyed allele and one blue-eyed allele, I would only have brown eyes. But if I had two blue-eyed alleles, I would have blue eyes. There's so much more information, like a ton of information that I could share with you about just the background of genetics. I'm going to stop here right now because it's already overwhelming. And I think you might want to go back and rewatch this video so you're getting a little more familiar with these vocabulary terms, because you're going to be hearing things like dominant, recessive, chromosome, DNA. You need to know what these terms are referring to in the bigger picture of genetics. So again, genetics is studying how parents are passing on these traits to their offspring, to their children. And we're really looking at right now the difference between dominant and recessive traits and how we get this genetic variation within species. So please do go back and rewatch this so that you are better off for the rest of this unit. And as always, reach out if you have any questions whatsoever.